Because the first one was so successful, Paramount greenlit Mission Impossible 2, this time in 2000, directed by John Woo, starring Tom Cruise, Thandwine Newton, Ving Rhames, and Anthony Hopkins. This one is about Ethan Hunt as he heads to Sydney to find and destroy a genetically modified disease called Chimera. So we're going to talk about all of this movie has to offer, and of course, if you as a Christian should watch it. Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm your host Tim, and we exist to help Christians live in the world, not of the world, by utilizing our convictions in the movies and shows we watch. This one is rated PG-13 for some intense sequencing, violent action, and some sensuality. So we're going to, of course, go over the Christian conviction meter, some convictions you may have in watching the film. We'll talk about any theological themes that may be present in Mission Impossible 2, as well as wrapping it up with a personal review from yours truly. Without further ado, let's head over to the Christian conviction meter. In this one, there is a lot of fighting. There's a lot of action in this, as we come to expect with the Mission Impossible franchise. This one does have, I think, some more stylized moments of violence and gore, as we'll talk a bit more on the review front. But in terms of what is present that may prevent you from watching this film, there's some cutting, there's some shooting, there's some bullets, explosions, there's some stabbing and slicing, particularly on the face. And so there's these things that are present that may prevent you from watching this film. Because of these reasons, I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5 on the violence and gore front. Moving over to lust, this is probably the biggest area of difference we see compared to the last film. There was really not much of anything in the last film, although I did give it a 1 out of 5 if I remember correctly. This one, they definitely upped the ante. There is definitely some relational tension between Thandwine Newton's character and Tom Cruise's characters. There is a lot of passionate kissing. There is also a scene where she's sitting on their lap. There's also some innuendos used throughout the entire film, particularly when these two characters first meet. On top of that, there is also a sequence in here where they obviously share a kiss, and the next we see them is they are in bed. Nothing is shown, right? Nothing is shown. I do want to emphasize that. But you can clearly see that they are in bed and they are not wearing clothes. So if this is an area for you, they're like, probably should hold off from this, I would recommend doing so. We don't want you to get caught up in anything that will adhere you or prevent you from following Jesus. So with that being said, this is going to be a 3 out of 5 on this particular category here. Moving over to substances, there is no alcohol really present within the film, although there might be some cans because one of the sequencing is over at like a derby, like a horse derby. So there might be some alcohol present there, but nothing I explicitly saw when watching this film. There are cigars present, but none are used. With that being said, I'm going to give this a 1 out of 5 in this area. Again, to be safe rather than sorry. Next up is profanity, and this one in particular has kind of your run-of-the-mill PG-13, but there is a few things that are slightly different in this film. The SH word is used, DA word's used, even the BA word's used. BI is used, I think, a few times in this film. The mention of hell is used in a more kind of curse-atory sense. Is that even a word? But in all seriousness, on top of that, there is also some slang terms that are more offensive to women or more derogatory terms in that sense. Again, I would recommend using the IMDB parent guide to be specific on what those words are, or you could do a quick Google search to help you determine whether this is something you can deal with or not. But I do understand language can be a bit of an issue. That is why I'm going to give this a 3 out of 5 on this scale here. And lastly, wrapping it up with some intense scenes and horror images. There's nothing specifically horror about this film, but there is a lot of intense stuff within this movie. There is a plane crash earlier on in the film that may cause some stress for some of you, particularly in that regard. There is a person who is like threatened to lose part of his pinky with like a cigar cutter, and we don't see what happens, but we do hear the blade kind of going through, so there is that as well. There's lots of explosions, probably more than most of your other Mission Impossible franchise films. On top of that as well, there is also, of course, seeing the effects of this deadly disease that the whole plot hinges on. We do get to see the ramifications of this disease, how it affects the body. I will say, if you don't like looking at diseases, stuff like that, this probably is not the right film for you to watch, because it isn't super horror graphic, but it can lean into that territory for some of you, especially if you're weak in that area. That being said, other than that, you have some photos of crime scenes. Like I said, you have explosions and stuff like that we've seen in past Mission Impossible, the past Mission Impossible film, and the other Mission Impossible films going forward. So that being said, a 3 out of 5 on this category as well. Overall, this wraps up into a 13 out of 25. We're above the halfway point. Everything else other than the less category is kind of on the right track, like on the similar track to other Mission Impossible movies, other PG-13 movies. The lust category, I will say, is definitely a little bit greater than we see in some other movies. So if you struggle in any of these areas, again, highly recommend using the IMDB parent guide. It'll be in the description below. That'll go in more detail about these things. In terms of theological themes, there really isn't any themes present. I do want to specify, though, that there is a holy ceremony practiced. If I remember correctly, I believe it's called the Holy Week of Seville, in which one part Anthony Hopkins' character, he kind of marvels at the spectacle of it. The issue is I think they mixed up a few different festivals together, and so, because saints aren't burned in the Holy Week of Seville, so there is like some, hey, let's try to represent this well, but then it just falls flat. So there is that there. If there's any Catholic friends who are watching this video, feel free to correct me, educate me down in the comments below, because this is brand new kind of territory for me. I just took a brief look at the Holy Week of Seville, and that's about it. So if there's anyone who knows a bit more on that, feel free to drop it in the comments below. But other than that, there's really nothing. So let's move on to the review. This movie screams late 90s, early 2000s with its explosions and sometimes unnecessary explosions to crazy acrobatic stunts that somewhat are impossible, and of course it's slow motion. It is the most stylized of the Mission Impossible franchise, and it has some pretty good things. The story overall is solid. The dialogue can be kind of clunky at points. The villain is just meh. He could be so much better, but just, I think he just falls flat, unfortunately. And again, like I said, the premise is solid here, but it doesn't live up to, I think, the Mission Impossible standard. It is easily the weakest of the franchise. But that being said, there are a few things to like here. So it is in that kind of mediocre middle. It's not absolutely terrible, but it's not super duper great. And I'm going to give it a 6.7 out of 10 on that. And that wraps up the Christian Conviction Meter, theological themes, and a review of this film. Keep in mind that it's a 13 out of 25 on the Conviction Meter, and the IMDB parent guide is available in the link down below, specifically for this movie. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up. We greatly appreciate it. It helps send us out into the algorithm and allows for more Christians to utilize their convictions in the movies and shows we watch. And of course, if you're interested, please consider hitting that subscribe button and joining our family here on YouTube. We would definitely appreciate it. That being said, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend time with us here on the channel. We truly appreciate it. But before you go, there's a few video recommendations here that YouTube is suggesting to you based off what you watch. There is, of course, the other Mission Impossible review up there for you. So consider taking a look at that if you're interested. And we'll see you all in the next one.